What's up, guys? It's Toad back with another edition of Better Off Dead College Football Week 6. Getting late into the night. It's the Wednesday routine. As usual, I went 1-3 with the college show last week. Not good at all, obviously. My apologies. I thought those were solid plays, and it looked like it was at least going to go 2-2 by the end of it. But of course, if you saw the Duke Notre Dame game and how that ended, Duke was hanging in there. I had Duke +6. They had taken the lead late in the game, and they were up 1. So, it looked like maybe it was a spot where like Notre Dame would wind up just winning the game with a field goal, and we'd maybe lose the money line play, but still get the cover or whatever. But no, Notre Dame, of course, scores a touchdown, and not only do they do that, but they go for 2 to push the lead to 7, and they get that. They convert. They take the 7-point lead. They wind up winning by 7, cover the 6. Duke does not cover the +6. Right at the end, brutal way to lose that. Really crazy, unbelievable. That sucked. College football has not been good so far. My NFL has been significantly better, as you guys know if you've been following me. College football has not been my forte the last 2 seasons or season and a half at this point, which, again, I apologize. This sucks, man. And I've been putting out videos as well. I've had like some leans that I haven't actually bet on, and those seem to all be hitting. Like I mentioned Old Dominion last week. That wound up being a cover. That one. Texas Tech won. So do what you will with the things that I think are a little bit less strong, but I still do lean that way. So I still do have that opinion and like that play. And then if you've been following me, I've put out like these baseball sort of leans as well, but I feel less strongly about those because those I'm just like looking at the board like in its entirety and just saying how I feel about all the games that are out there on the board. Maybe I should stop doing that just because those are like weaker, whereas at least with the college couple of extra plays or leans that I gave out last week, at least I felt a little bit more strongly about those. We can look at the college football board here this week. And of course, I got these 2 right, even though I was just kind of messing around, just going over the whole board this morning. I was actually right about Jacksonville State and New Mexico State tonight, so take that for what you will, I guess. And it looks like Liberty is getting like all the cash, basically, and the line has moved up all the way up to 21. So I think if you like Liberty there, that value has been drained out. The value's gone, although it looks like Liberty might be the side that's getting the pro money there. It looks like Western Kentucky actually might be the right side here too, with this discrepancy here with a ton of the tickets and a little bit less of the cash on La Tech for tomorrow's college games that we got going on there in those smaller conferences. I don't like either of those games. I do actually kind of like Kansas State just because this looks like this is Friday night. Not going to be one of my plays at all, but ticket percentage, 67% on Oklahoma State and 70% of the cash on Kansas State. Kansas State has also moved up, so it's kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it reverse line movement, but the line movement has gone against where the majority of tickets are, although not the majority of cash. I think the feeling here is that the professional bettors know that Kansas State is the much better team, and the recreational people are going to look at this and think, hey, this is like a Big 12 matchup here. We think this should be like a competitive game. Like, how is K-State like a double-digit favorite on the road there? It's because they are actually that much better than Oklahoma State this year. I think Oklahoma State is definitely down this year. So I think that's mostly a numbers play. So I will point that out. And then I actually think Illinois would be the way I would lean in the Nebraska-Illinois game as well. As you can see here, public looks like they're on Nebraska. 88% of the tickets, 84% of the cash, so a little bit less, although the line looks like it's actually maybe dropped from 3.5 to potentially hitting 3 on Illinois there. But Illinois looked awful last week. They got blasted by Purdue. Purdue's a team that maybe coalescing a little bit, maybe getting a little bit better. So I think Illinois just looked really bad in that game. So, but Purdue is maybe better than people think they are right now. So that's the way that I would look. I think Illinois probably has a little bit of value there. I would actually like it a lot if Nebraska had played a close game against Michigan last week, which they didn't. Michigan blew them out. But if Nebraska played them close, then I would like Illinois actually quite a bit there. I think Nebraska would be in like kind of that hangover spot, and Illinois coming off that ugly blowout loss. So those are my feelings there. I still would just slightly lean Illinois there. Just an opinion on that. And then a few other games maybe of interest here, just because I'm looking at it. Kansas, Central Florida, this number has dropped below the 3, all the way down to 1.5. And I think the feeling here is that Kansas had kind of a reality check last week. They were undefeated going into last week. They were ranked. People were thinking, hey, Kansas is a good team, but I don't think that their wins were really that impressive. And then they ran into an actual good team in Texas, and Texas just absolutely annihilated them. So I think that might be a situation where Kansas might have a little bit of a hangover there and maybe lose the game twice. But Central Florida, I don't know how they get up for that game. You can see Central Florida does really look like it's a side here with the number going down from 3 to 1.5. I would not want to play it really at 1.5. Maybe you could get like an underdog money line on Central Florida there, and it might be okay. But 70% of the tickets on Kansas, 66% of the cash, so less of the cash. So this looks like there's all this reverse line movement. The smarter bets are all taking UCF there. But UCF, they're in a spot, man, where they played Baylor last week. And I'll mention Baylor in one of my actual plays. They will be mentioned, I think, at least. But Baylor, so last week, UCF, they played Baylor. Baylor's a big-name team, typically pretty good football team. Not this year, though, I don't think. I think they're down this year. Central Florida was actually like a double-digit favorite in that game, and I think Central Florida had like a big lead. They were up, I think, 17 in like the fourth quarter, and I think the whole thing collapsed, and they actually wound up losing the game to Baylor by 1. So in that spot, I would not want to really be on Central Florida there. I wouldn't really want to be on either of these teams there, which may tell you why this game has moved up on the total there from 62 to 65, because the thought might be these teams might both be in kind of a flat spot and not come out with like the most intense defense that you might see from them. But Central Florida, I think that's kind of a brutal way to blow that game against a big-name team like Baylor, even though Central Florida was the big favorite in that one, so they may be like an embarrassed team as well coming into this. So I would still lean to Central Florida there, but just my feelings on that. Let's get into the actual plays that we got going on here, though. First one's going to be Missouri +6. And what we have going on here, this is a spot where this is a fade of LSU for the most part. And this has actually gone down a little bit further, I think, to 5.5. I think it was 7 really early in the week. And unfortunately, I did not get that because that's the key number there. Between 6 and 5.5, I don't think there's that much of a difference there. Like, I think you'd be okay taking the 5.5. So here you can see 56% of the tickets on LSU, according to pregame, which I like their setup here the most for looking at like the market view here. I think they give a little bit better of a view as far as the free ones go. And 71% of the money on Missouri. So you can see here there's that big discrepancy there. It looks like the public is kind of on LSU. They know that LSU is the better team, which the books are still telling you they are. They're a road favorite, yeah. But the smarter guys, the line has moved against that, and you see a lot of the money on Missouri. And I think a lot of the reason for that is the situation that LSU is in here. LSU, you look at the spot that they're in, I think this is a really bad spot for them. They come off a game at ranked Ole Miss, which is a pretty big game because Ole Miss has been playing pretty well this year. Their biggest game since like the opener, they lost to Florida State. And you can see here LSU has lost both of their games against ranked opponents. So you can take from that what you will. I think Missouri is not as good a team as those two, of course, but even so, the way that LSU lost that game to Ole Miss, that was a shootout. LSU, I believe, had a 2-score lead like pretty late in the game. They wound up allowing back-to-back touchdowns after they were up 9, I think, with a couple minutes left in the game, and gave up, 2 touchdowns in a row, wound up losing the game at Ole Miss. Huge game for Ole Miss, which is something I'm going to talk about. So if you know me, you probably know one of my plays is going to be here, mentioning Ole Miss. That'll come up, and you can see the tabs I have open anyway. Whatever. LSU, the way that they lost that game, man, I think that's a tough way to lose that, blowing that game in a big game like that. But I think more importantly than that, This, I think, can be considered to be a dream crusher scenario for LSU. And that's a situation where we have here is LSU. They enter the season, they're much higher ranked than ranked 23, which is where they've fallen to now. I think they were like even a top 5 team maybe at the beginning of the season when they played Florida State. Their season aspirations were to make the college football playoffs and to contend. That's what they want to do. They're LSU. They're a big name team. They at least always have that mystique around them, that thought that they might be able to be like in contention for the college football championship or in contention to get into the playoffs at the very least. This second loss here, and you're in the SEC, and you got a tough road ahead like this. You're gonna have to play Alabama at some point. I think that those hopes are just dashed. Those hopes are gone, and now they have to go second game in a row on the road. They have to go to Missouri. I think this is going to be tough, man. This is going to be a tough spot for LSU after all that. In Missouri, people are going to look at them and think, well, who have they beaten? They haven't really beaten anybody except K-State. That was a good win against K-State, so there was that. But this, I think they're going to be motivated for this. Missouri, I mean, they haven't had a big-name opponent since that, and now, like, this is a spot where, Vanderbilt, they played last week. That's not a game they're going to really get totally up for and be totally focused on it. They will definitely be focused, and they have a team like LSU. Even if LSU has lost the second game, they've dropped to the 23rd ranking. Missouri wants to justify the fact that they are ranked 21st. I would think differently, like if Missouri, because I think maybe they're overranked as being ranked 21 just because they're undefeated. I would think that there might not be value on Missouri if they're playing some different opponent, some opponent that's not that good. Like Missouri kind of just enters the top 25 and they'd be kind of high on themselves. But in this situation, I think that's not going to be the case at all. They just played a pretty bad Vanderbilt team, didn't win by that much. And now they have LSU coming in. LSU, the big name team, known to be a good team almost perennially in college football. I like Missouri. I think the situation lines up pretty badly for LSU. Mostly it's a bad spot for LSU, but I think it's a decent spot for Missouri. I think that is where the value is going to be. Missouri +6. It's 5.5 now, but I'm still okay with that. And of course, with these underdogs like this, the small ones, at least the ones that are not double digits, I like to sprinkle 10% of the bet on the money line. So if they come through and actually win the game outright, because if you're saying they're going to cover the spread, you're saying that there's probably value on that money line as well, and that there's a better chance than they're being given to actually win the game outright as well. So a little bit there. And if it's like a double-digit underdog, it gets into kind of the territory where I still want to have a slight amount on the money line just because of that chance, but I'll drop it down to 3% of the bet instead of 10 for some of those other ones. The next play is not really a situational play, but it's one that caught my eye, and I just have a sense about it, looking at the market and looking at kind of the power rating structure. And this is Louisiana, or formerly known as Louisiana Lafayette, the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, who's now just the University of Louisiana. Louisiana, Ragin' Cajuns. I think this is a spot where this is a numbers play for the most part, where I think they are being undervalued in the market somewhat significantly. And if we look at this one, I think that's kind of bared out in how the where are they, man? There they are, UL Lafayette. I think it's kind of been borne out in how the market has looked here. With 60% of the tickets are on them, but 82% of the money. So this number was 1, and now it's gone up to 2.5, and it looks like it's approaching 3. I would want to get it before it hits 3. Don't let it get to that key number. Play it at least a number that's below 3. I laid 2.5 because I hadn't seen it right away. And I looked at this, and my first thought was, I think Texas State might be an overvalued team at this point, because I think they're a one-loss team. They're 4-1 or something like that. But anyway, this is telling you that this is telling you the big money is on Louisiana Lafayette here, or Louisiana. You can see here because of that discrepancy with more money than the ticket percentage, even though the majority of both are on them. But this is probably going to be a game that's not bet in significant volume because it's a lower conference game. So I don't know. The books aren't really going to take a huge hit on that if Louisiana Lafayette does actually come through there. But what I was saying is Texas State, they're a 4-1 team, and I think they're overvalued coming into this. I thought that might be the case already. I mean, you look at what they've done. Their offense has been scoring a ton. You can see here, and they scored 50 last week against Southern Miss, and I think people are going to the public bettors, well, although it doesn't look like it in the market that I just showed there, but I think kind of the perception there is going to be that the Texas State has like this high-flying offense, and that's kind of the type of team that is going to be overvalued a bit in the market, and that people are actually going to want to bet on. They beat Baylor in week 1, which people are going to, at that point, that looked like a big win, like a big upset. And I talked about that because I actually bet UTSA against Texas State the next week, but UTSA won and didn't cover, unfortunately for me, because I thought Texas State would be in a letdown spot and be overvalued. We see that Baylor win, even though it was a double-digit upset back then, that's not looking so good now with the way Baylor's looked this season. That doesn't look that good anymore. They put up 77 against Jackson State, but I think Jackson State's an FCS team, but people know who Jackson State is because that's where Deion Sanders coached before he moved over to Colorado. So they have kind of recognition now, and putting up 77 just looks crazy, kind of regardless of your opponent. Then they beat Nevada, and I think Nevada is kind of seen as they're usually a school that has like a pretty good football program, so that's going to look like a pretty good win for Texas State. But I think that is less good than it looks too, because I think Nevada is down this year as well. So I don't think this 4-1 record here is that impressive, really. And then they put up 50 against Southern Miss, but of course you can see their defense has kind of been giving up quite a bit and getting scored on, so that doesn't bode well for them. But Southern Miss, not a very good team either. They're a 1-win team. And now you got Louisiana Lafayette as your opponent. They're one of the better teams that Texas State has had to face this year, and people will see, Louisiana's 3-2, so their record's a little bit worse. So one of their losses was last week at Minnesota, and that was like the one big conference team that they play this year. So that was a big game for Louisiana, but you can't fault them for losing at Minnesota at a Big Ten team on the road. So that win is certainly not, that loss, is certainly not anything to scoff over. And then the game before that, only winning by 7 over Buffalo, who hasn't really done much of anything, even though I talked about Buffalo last week and I actually bet them, and they actually won their first game, and they were my only win last week. So, hey, at least there was that. That 7-point win doesn't look good over Buffalo, but Louisiana was winning that game, I think, by 21 pretty late in the game. And then I think they just kind of took their foot off the gas. So they were dominating that game. So I think overall, Louisiana is better than what they've looked so far, and Texas State is not quite as good as how they've looked so far. That all leads me, and if you look at some power ratings that are out there, it looks like the power ratings guys actually have Louisiana ranked somewhere in the vicinity of maybe even 4 points better than Texas State. And here they're at home and only laying under 3, 2.5 at home. But the power ratings guys mostly have them as the better team. And so here they're maybe not even getting home field advantage here, or just barely. Home field, you think is probably approximately 3 in a situation like this. So I think this line should be over 3. I think it should probably be maybe even above 4, maybe in the vicinity of 5. That's a numbers play. I think there is value there on Louisiana, so I like it. I like Louisiana minus 2.5. That's that. Next up, the one that I referenced when I was talking about the other SEC game, when I was talking about LSU, we're going to look at the other side of that LSU Ole Miss game that happened last week, and we're going to take Arkansas plus 11.5. And I like this one, even though the market doesn't look like it's actually agreeing with me right now. If I could type at all, hey. Where you have 68% of the tickets, but 70% of the money on Ole Miss right now. And Ole Miss looks like it's gone up as well from 11 to 11.5. I think we might see a little bit of a shift here. We can tell that Ole Miss is at least pretty public here, so I'm going to tend to be contrarian in most cases just because of that. But I think that these numbers are going to kind of move slightly, these percentages, and I don't actually expect the higher money percentage to remain on Ole Miss throughout the rest of the week. I could be wrong about that, but we'll it remains to be seen. We'll see. But I trust my situational angles that I have going on here, and I think that this is really not a good spot for Ole Miss at all here. And as we mentioned, Ole Miss coming off that huge win against LSU. And not only that, but they had a game against Alabama the week prior to that. And that was a game where they kind of hung in there and played pretty tough. So they're coming off of back-to-back tough games. They were at Alabama, then they came home and they came from behind 9 late in the game, scoring 2 touchdowns late against LSU, winning in very dramatic, epic fashion against LSU. Ole Miss is probably their biggest game of the season, certainly their biggest win of the season. Now I think this is a letdown spot coming off of that. And they do also have Auburn up next. And even if Auburn is a little bit down and they haven't won in the SEC yet, I think Auburn kind of carries with them more of that name recognition, more weight than a team like Arkansas does. So I might even argue that that game is going to have more attention and more focus for Ole Miss than the Arkansas game does. But off of Alabama and then LSU and the way they beat LSU, I think this can only be a letdown spot for Ole Miss. And they're laying a lot of points here, man. I don't see how they get completely focused after that massive win and they're staying at home, possibly celebrating during the week, reading their press clippings. They're kind of high and mighty right now, and they got Arkansas coming in, and Arkansas is a team who is going to be a little bit desperate here because they haven't won in conference yet. They've lost 3 in a row, but, I mean, they've faced 3, well, BYU, not that great a team, but I think they got caught by BYU, to be honest. Arkansas, they were a big favorite against BYU. Like probably at least an 8-point favorite in that one. I've mentioned it in some of my other videos, but I think Arkansas got caught looking ahead to the LSU game there, which was the much bigger game there. So I don't put that much weight in that upset loss to BYU. Arkansas is still the better team than BYU there. Then the LSU game, they played tough, man. They played tough. As you can see here, they lost by 3. I think the game was actually as close as that score would indicate. So then, last week, Arkansas had to come off that game and play Texas A&M, and I don't think you can fault them for losing to Texas A&M. They were at home, but Texas A&M is a good team. Texas A&M was a favorite on the road. I think they were 6 or 7, somewhere around there, 7-point favorite on the road, and Arkansas was in a bad spot coming off LSU. Like, how do you get up after having that close a game against LSU? Really big game like that. You come off of that, you have to come back home. And then you play Texas A&M. And, they didn't do that badly against Texas A&M. As you can see here, it's fairly respectable, really. But that, I think, was kind of a sandwich spot in a way as well because they were coming off that huge game against LSU, and they have ranked Ole Miss coming up next and then Alabama after that. This is a spot where now that they've come off of that game where they lost, and not a great game, not a great loss, really, even though they were the dog there. Now I think they can be focused on Ole Miss there, and Ole Miss is this is kind of a buy low, sell high. It's, you're playing the market here. In sports betting, it's the case as well. You're looking for teams that are undervalued against teams that are overvalued, and I think that's what we have here. Ole Miss is up to the 16th ranked team, and Arkansas has dropped below 500, hasn't won yet in the SEC. They've fallen down a bit, and I think we're getting some value here. It's a big number. Arkansas plus 11.5. Ole Miss in the letdown spot there, kind of a classic spot to go against them. And Arkansas coming off a game that they lost, where you can kind of see that they were themselves in a bad situation in that particular game last week, and now they're coming in and they're in a little bit of a better situation. So Arkansas plus 11.5. And finally, Cal. UC Berkeley, Cal plus 9.5 is going to be the final play. We're getting into these 2 are night games, and we're getting into the late night here, and this is going to be a fade of Oregon State. As you can see here, they have 80% of the tickets, but only 72% of the money, although the number has kind of gone up a little bit, I guess, to 9.5. It's possible that in this one, if you wait, it might actually hit the 10. Not sure about that. It is possible that it might, and if you could do that, because if you wait and you wind up having to still take like the 9 or whatever, or even 8.5, I don't think there's that much of a difference there, which I said with like that Jets play last week in my NFL video. Yeah, so it's possible if you think you can get the 10, maybe you can wait on that. But either way, I think this is the right side. I think it's the right play here. Cal plus 9.5. And why do I think so? Oregon State, I think they're in a bad spot here. And this looks like a sandwich spot to me. They're coming off a couple of pretty big games in a row where they went to Washington State. And I think Washington State actually had a bigger lead than what the final score was here, where they wound up winning by 3. Washington State, I think, was actually a home underdog in that game. And I had talked about that as a lean. I leaned to Washington State in that one. I thought Oregon State was a little bit overvalued coming into that one because really they were 3-0, but they hadn't really beaten anybody. And Oregon State was kind of thriving off of ukulele, whatever is cool. Ukulele, the fat man's guitar, the instrument that I play, the loser's guitar. No, but I think Oregon State, because that their quarterback, their ukulele, whatever his name is, he is a Clemson transfer, and I think Oregon State was kind of getting valued kind of based off of having him as well, without having yet proven how good they really are. But anyway, at any rate, I thought they were a little bit overvalued going into the Washington State game. That was a pretty big game. Washington State's pretty good, have a pretty good quarterback, and Washington State wound up beating them and wound up being a close final. But Oregon State, I think, they look a little bit better than they actually were in that game based off of that final score. And then Oregon State had a big primetime game last week, which does mean they have one extra day off because they played on Friday, but I don't think that's much of a factor here in this case. They had a primetime, a big game against Utah, and they held Utah's offense very much in check and beat them in primetime, which people that were watching that stayed up late saw that game on Friday night. Oregon State was able to win that game 21-7, but Utah, I think, is still they still are dealing with some injuries. I think they're still without their starting quarterback. So I don't know how much I can really put into that, but Oregon State's coming off those 2 ranked opponents. Now they have to go to Cal, who is kind of a team in the Pac-12 that you just like overlook. Teams tend to just overlook them, but I think Cal, they're not just a doormat this year. I mean, they're actually an above 500 team. But also for Oregon State, they have UCLA coming up next. And UCLA, they're a team that was ranked to start the season, even though they've dropped out of the rankings for now, at least because I believe they lost to Utah. But UCLA, I mean, they're still a big name team. They're known in the Pac-12. It's possible that they start getting better because UCLA, I talked about them in week 1 when I bet against them with Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina was able to squeak through, and they made it closer closer to blowing the cover than it really should have. Like Coastal Carolina definitely was covering for most of that. UCLA, they are a team that came into the season kind of in rebuilding mode a bit and not really knowing who their quarterback was going to be either. So they had a bit of turnover, and they still don't entirely know who their quarterback is. But all that aside, I think that's still a bigger game for Oregon State. They have bigger games all surrounding this Cal game. Washington State, Utah, UCLA, all bigger games. This is a sandwich spot for Oregon State. And then when you have Cal here, what happened here? People are going to look at them and say, hey, they were a pretty big favorite against Arizona State last week. And Arizona State's a team that's kind of in turmoil. They've been dealt, or I think they got dealt some penalties that they had to take at some point for like not abiding by COVID protocol or some bullshit like that. And they decided to self-inflict those penalties. I don't even know how you want to state that, but they decided to take the penalties themselves this year, and they're ineligible for the bowl season, I believe. So Arizona State's a team that people think is kind of a mess right now, and in a way, they are. So people are going to look at that and say, how did Cal only beat Arizona State by 3 points there, and they were a big favorite? Like, they're not going to be able to do anything against Oregon State. What are you, crazy? I don't know, because I think that Cal was in a bad spot in that one because they'd come off that game against Washington, who's a highly ranked team. They got Penix as their quarterback. They have a really good offense. That was a big game for Cal. And Cal was able to put up some decent offense in that one. And that Arizona State game was between that and this game against Oregon State. So Cal was in the sandwich spot really in that game. And now it's Oregon State who's in the sandwich spot coming into Cal. And if you look at Cal's 2 losses, losing to Washington, Can't really fault them for that. And losing to Auburn, Auburn's not a bad team. I don't think you can fault them for either of those. So if we're going to recap those plays here, Missouri +6, Louisiana Lafayette -2.5, Arkansas +11.5, and Cal +9.5. And those are the plays, the actual plays I'm on this week in college football. I don't know if there's anything else that I kind of want to point out here. I mean, I would say that I lean Texas A&M with the way this has shifted a bit. You can see that they have the cash versus Bama having more of the tickets there. I think Alabama is still kind of thriving off of their name recognition, but I think they are actually kind of a down. They're down for Alabama this year. Let's put it that way. And then, there's the Red River rivalry. I don't know where it is on the board here, but the Oklahoma-Texas game, that's always a big game. I was going to say I actually lean Oklahoma here, but now I actually don't know because the market has actually shifted, and it looks like Texas is getting more of the money. So I'll just leave it at that. You can follow me, Tower Gang Toad, on Twitter. I am one of the hosts of the Tower Gang podcast, the most offensive podcast on the planet. We just did another episode that was over 2 hours long. I'm running on fumes here. I'm going to need more coffee before I do the NFL show, which I'm still about to do next. So if I seem completely out of it, that is why. Follow the Tower Gang pod. We're on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. You can subscribe to the locals and throw us some money. TowerGang.locals.com. I am Toad. I am the host of this show, Better Off Dead, and I am indeed better off dead, especially at this point. I might not be alive to even do the NFL show that I'm going to do in about an hour. Peace